a standing ovation for Ukraine President Zelenskyy yesterday. That was inside Ireland's Parliament. And before Zelenskyy arrived there, we had learned that there was an assassination attempt made on Zelenskyy's life, almost certainly by the Russians, as various drones were swarming above Ireland's airspace. And but for Zelenskyy's planes arriving ahead of schedule, there could have been an actual assassination on Zelenskyy. I know this really isn't getting attention anywhere in the American press or in lots of other press. We need to cover that here. By the way, please subscribe to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. We bring the receipts. We bring the facts. We cover things that other people are not focused on. And you know we're under attack from the Trump regime and state regime media, which calls itself Fox. So please, if you can, hit subscribe right now. You may think you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, but double check because you might not actually be subscribed. So here's what happened yesterday. Shortly after a plane carrying Ukrainian President Zelenskyy landed in Dublin, Ireland on Monday, a group of 4 large unidentified military-style drones entered the no-fly zone and began circling over Dublin International Airport, according to the reporting by The Telegraph. Sources are reporting that the drones would have been directly in the flight path of the plane carrying Zelenskyy if it had not taken off and landed in Dublin ahead of schedule, with officials in Ireland and Europe calling it an act of hybrid warfare and a possible assassination attempt against the president of Ukraine, almost certainly from Russia. After circling over the airport for a short time, the drones flew east, orbiting over a warship with the Irish Navy that had been secretly deployed to the Irish Sea ahead of the visit by Zelenskyy. So with that potential assassination attempt on Zelenskyy, what is the United States doing? What is the Trump regime doing? Well, they're lifting sanctions from Russia, and they're encouraging Russian oil companies like Lukoil to make more money. So not only is the Trump regime not imposing sanctions or secondary sanctions against Russia, they're rewarding Russia as Russia threatens a full-fledged war against Europe, and as Russia has engaged in this likely assassination attempt against Zelenskyy. So yesterday, the U.S. Treasury Department suspended some of the sanctions imposed in October by the Trump administration on the Russian multinational energy corporation Lukoil, extending a waiver authorizing Lukoil branded gas stations throughout Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas to continue operating outside of Russia until at least April 29th, 2026. So as the Trump regime tries to attack Europe, oh, you're buying gas and oil from Russia. Really, the main countries in Europe that are buying oil from Russia at this point are Hungary, which is Orban, and Slovakia. Putin allies who Donald Trump supports. And so this is all just BS pretext for Donald Trump to try to attack Ukraine and to try to attack and undermine NATO and undermine Europe. I'm going to show you that speech that Zelenskyy gave in a moment in Ireland. Wow, was it powerful. But before that speech, you had Putin warning Europe that Russia is ready for a full-fledged war against all of Europe. And this is as Zelenskyy saying that Russia plan with the United States is a plan for surrender and that Ukraine is not going to agree to it at all. So Zelenskyy put out a very powerful statement yesterday, and here's what he said. He said, Ukrainian representatives will continue their discussions in the United States with President Trump's team. Our task now is to obtain full information about what was said in Moscow between Witkoff, Kushner, and the Russian representatives, and what other pretexts Putin has come up with to drag out the war and to pressure Ukraine. Ukraine is prepared for any possible developments, and of course, we will work as constructively as possible with all partners to ensure that peace is achieved and that it is, after all, a dignified peace. Only a dignified peace provides real security, and we fully understand that this requires and will continue to require the support of our partners. And you see there Zelenskyy's tone really changing on the United States. And lots of Zelenskyy's allies in Europe, Friedrich Merz in Germany, others throughout Europe, are basically saying, be very, very careful. The European intelligence is likely who leaked those conversations between Witkoff and Kushner and Kirill Dmitriev and Yuri Yushkov, where they came up with the surrender plan and they were mocking Zelenskyy. And so I think European intelligence services have really been monitoring the behavior of Trump and Witkoff and Kushner, and they see that the United States wants to sell out NATO, Europe, and Zelenskyy, which we always knew, but it's taking on a very kind of concrete terms as Putin threatens all-out war against Europe. I'll show you what Putin said, but first let me bring you to the speech that Zelenskyy gave on the floor of Parliament in Ireland, where he got that standing ovation that I shared with you at the outset. Here's what he said, a real powerful speech. Play this clip.
Ukraine wants peace. Ladies and gentlemen, one strong country can start a war. Another strong country can help to stop the war. But to restore justice and defend what's right, we need a community, a world made up of many different nations. It is the community of nations that decides, united by shared sentiments, shared aspirations, a shared desire for justice. It is a community of nations that makes peace truly lasting. Geographically, large or small, politically influential or playing a different role, economically powerful or not, when these different voices stand together on the side of justice, on the side of free people, there is only one possible outcome: peace, and justice must prevail. When you have a true community of nations on your side, you cannot be crushed and your rights can be restored. No one can break the world alone. Not even Russia, not even with its few bodies. No one can lie to the entire world forever, not even Putin. No one can stand against everyone else. And that is the truth, but also true, one can inspire everyone else. And that is why Ukraine is fighting for every voice in the world, for every community in every region. We are trying to reach every heart, to answer every doubt, to counter every accusation with facts. And we are searching for and finding friends wherever we can.
So you've got some positive breaking news on the climate front, and you're going to want to hear this. It's a reminder of why it's so important that we all stay vigilant. So scientists with the EU's Copernicus monitoring service report that the Antarctic ozone this year was the smallest and shortest lived since 2019. So it maxed out at about 21 million square kilometers in September. That's far smaller than last year's, and then it closed early. They're calling it a reassuring sign that the ozone layer is steadily recovering thanks to the global ban on ozone depleting chemicals put in place by the 1987 Montreal Protocol. This is a concrete example of what happens when the world actually works together. You start seeing real progress, real healing, real results. NASA even ranked this year's hole as the 5th smallest since 1992. Scientists say that the recovery is on track, even if we still have a very long way to go. But here's the flip side, and it's why we cannot take our foot off the gas. While the planet is showing signs of recovery, the Trump administration is working overtime to reverse this progress. Trump has declared a war on clean energy, forcing clean energy plants to shut down across the country. That means lost jobs, higher energy bills, and a deliberate shift back to dirty, polluting fuels. The US did not even send a delegation to this year's COP30 summit, so the world is moving on and embracing the clean energy revolution without the United States. The path to solving both the climate crisis and affordability problems is the same: embracing clean energy, investing in green technology, and keeping the pressure on leaders who want to drag us backwards. This ozone milestone is a reminder of what humanity can achieve when we act together, so let's stay engaged, stay informed, and keep pushing for a cleaner, safer, and more affordable future. Remember to tell me what you think about this report, the climate, energy, whatever is on your mind in the comments below. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Okay, Ben, back to you.
Now, in contrast, Here's what Putin said yesterday. Putin threatened to start a full-scale war with Europe, saying there would be nothing left of it if he did. He's now implying that his 11-year war against Ukraine isn't a failed attempt to conquer a sovereign neighboring country. It's only because they haven't even started the real war yet, which they want to take over Europe. And here's what Putin said. They're on the side of war, Europe, even when they tried to make changes to Trump's proposal. We see clearly what's happening. All these changes aim to block the peace process by putting forward demands that are absolutely unacceptable for Russia. They understand this and want to blame Russia for derailing the peace process. That's their goal. We see this clearly. We don't intend to fight with Europe. I've said this 100 times, but if Europe certainly and suddenly wants to fight us, and starts, we're ready now. With Ukraine, we're acting surgically, carefully, so to speak. But it's clear, right? This isn't war in the direct modern sense of the word. If Europe suddenly wants to start a war with us, a situation could quickly arise where we have no one left to negotiate with. You see those threats right here? Let me show you now what Julianne Smith, former U.S. ambassador to NATO, told Christiane Amanpour. Here, play this clip.
So here's from the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte. This is a quote from his press conference after the NATO meeting. He says, "We're ready and willing to do what it takes to protect our 1 billion people and secure our territory." This is after this from Russia, from Putin. Just take a listen to this.
We're not planning to go to war with Europe. I have already spoken about this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly wants to go to war with us and starts, we're ready right now.
So, there are two things going on here. There's Russia versus Ukraine, and then there's Russia versus Europe. Do you believe Putin when he says we never want to go to war with Europe, but if it happens, we'll be ready?
Well, I found that statement to be disturbing. It seemed to be a very thinly veiled threat that Russia is at the ready and possibly willing to try and touch NATO territory. What we do know is that Russia has spent years, decades, trying very hard to erode allies' commitment and faith in NATO's Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. We've seen a number of sabotage events in recent years. We've seen incidents where drones have flown into Polish airspace. We had the incident with Russian jets flying over Estonia. These are classic plays on the part of the Russian playbook. They are designed to divide the alliance, to chip away at the unity that exists inside the NATO alliance, and to create uncertainty and insecurity across the entire European continent. And so when I hear the statement that Putin made yesterday, in some ways it's not altogether surprising, but it should worry Europe quite a bit in terms of how Russia is positioning itself to possibly touch or invade or intervene in NATO territory, which I hope never happens, but I don't like the sound of what we heard yesterday from Putin.
Now, as the Trump regime shows its cards clearly that it's a Putin bootlicking administration regime, European leaders are now considering dumping $2.43 trillion in U.S. debt if Trump abandons Ukraine, which would potentially trigger an economic crisis worse than 2008. So Europe is hanging that over Donald Trump. You abandon Ukraine, you side with Russia, we're going to dump the debt. And, good luck. There will be economic calamity, and that will be what the legacy of your regime. So Europe asserting itself, and Friedrich Merz is really behind that plan as well, Germany's chancellor, punching back. Here's what Donald Trump said in the Oval Office the other day, where he looked very sickly and he kept on falling asleep. But here's what he said when he was asked about Putin and Ukraine. Here, play this clip.
I don't know what the Kremlin's doing. I can tell you that they had a reasonably good meeting with President Putin. We're going to find out. When I was in this office and I talked about no cards, I said, you have no cards. That was the time to settle. I thought that would have been a much better time to settle. But they, in their wisdom, decided not to do that. They have a lot of things against them right now. But you have President Putin had a very good meeting yesterday with Jared Kushner and with Steve Witkoff. What comes out of that meeting, I can't tell you, because it does take two to tango. Ukraine I think we have something pretty well worked out with them. They're very satisfied, considering.
And you spoke with Mr. Witkoff and with Mr. Kushner
Last night.
Did they give you the sense that President Putin still wants to end the war, wants to make peace?
He would like to end the war. That was their impression. Now, whether or not, that was their impression. Their impression was that he would like to see the war ended. I think he'd like to get back to dealing a more normal life. I think he'd like to be trading with the United States of America, frankly, instead of, losing thousands of soldiers a week. But their impression was very strongly that he'd like to make a deal. We'll see what happens.
Now, I want to also mention as well, there were congressional hearings that took place, and there were hearings in the Senate on Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainians. Here's what Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal had to say. Play this clip.
It's more than a war crime. It is literally genocide. It is genocide because the ultimate goal of abducting these children is to erase the Ukrainian identity. It is part of a strategic effort to erase the nation of Ukraine from existence. And Putin tried it by conquering territory. He continues that effort. And the attempted negotiations now ongoing in Moscow, we wish them well, but there's no sign of clear progress. And therefore, we need to move forward with our sanctions bill, with the designation of Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, as well as an effort to use the seized assets.
Now, while he was doing that, you had Kirill Dmitriev, the Russian envoy to the United States, who's been working with Witkoff to try to force a surrender, sucking up to Trump and Melania. Russia expresses its gratitude to the U.S. First Lady Melania Trump for her humanitarian work and her efforts to help families and children affected by the conflict. Well, folks, you saw it right there. An assassination attempt was made on Zelenskyy, which is not getting really attention anywhere. And Trump's response is to lift the sanctions of Russian gas and oil companies. What a sicko. What a treasonous you know what. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. We appreciate you so much.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.